In March 2012, the body of 28-year-old Keisha Washington was discovered inside room 407 of the Crystal Cove Resort in Nassau, Bahamas. What should have been a dream honeymoon ended in a brutal and bloody crime scene. The investigation that followed uncovered a shocking web of jealousy, betrayal, and violence. Just 4 days earlier, Keisha had married Darius Washington, a man whose charm concealed a dangerous darkness. But the truth about what happened in that hotel suite didn't begin the night of her death. It had been brewing for years, culminating in a tragic moment that left the world in shock. The soft golden light of dawn illuminated Nassau on March 6, 2012. Waves gently lapped at the shore, creating a rhythmic, soothing sound. However, inside the Crystal Cove Resort, there was no peace. The hallway outside room 407 had been silent for hours after a night that, according to the front desk staff, had been anything but ordinary. Several guests in nearby rooms reported loud noises, screams, and what sounded like furniture being smashed. Some even considered calling security, but in the end, no one wanted to intervene in what seemed like a heated couple's argument. It wasn't the first time a honeymooning couple had argued at the resort, and most assumed it would resolve itself by morning. But morning did not bring peace. It brought something far worse. At 6:45 a.m., a housekeeper assigned to clean room 407 knocked twice, waiting for a response. Silence. She knocked again, harder this time, but the stillness behind the door sent a shiver down her spine. The resort had strict rules about not disturbing guests, but something about that silence gave her a bad feeling. Cautiously, she turned the handle. The door wasn't locked. She gently pushed it open, expecting to find the usual mess left by careless tourists. Unmade beds, half-empty wine glasses, maybe even a towel abandoned on the floor. But instead, as her eyes swept across the room, her heart nearly stopped. The honeymoon suite, once a reflection of luxury, was now a scene of horror. The king-size bed was completely unmade, its white sheets stained dark red. The pillows, once smooth and fluffy, were crumpled and soaked in blood. A lamp on the nightstand had been knocked over, its shattered glass scattered across the carpet. The heavy curtains by the balcony swayed slightly, disturbed by the warm island breeze drifting in through the slightly open sliding door. And then there was the body. Keisha Washington, 28, lay motionless on the floor near the foot of the bed. Her face was almost unrecognizable beneath the swelling of bruises and deep cuts. Her delicate features had been destroyed, ruined by the brutality she had endured. Her left eye was completely swollen shut. Her lips were split and cracked. A deep laceration on her cheek suggested that something sharp had struck her repeatedly. Blood had pooled beneath her head, soaking into the carpet, darkening as it dried. The housekeeper stumbled back, her breathing ragged with panic as she fumbled for the small radio clipped to her uniform. Her voice, barely steady, trembled through the staff communication channel as she whispered what she had found. Within minutes, the Crystal Cove security team arrived, followed quickly by local police. Their presence turned what was once paradise into a crime scene. By March 7, 2012, the autopsy had begun, and with it, the investigation officially took shape. Keisha's injuries told a horrifying story. This was not a single blow or a moment of impulsive rage. Whoever attacked her had been relentless, brutal, driven by something far deeper than mere anger. Her cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head, with secondary injuries suggesting an attempted strangulation. Her hands, covered in defensive wounds, showed that she had fought with all her strength. But despite the brutality of her death, one fact overshadowed everything else. Her husband, Darius Washington, was missing. The man she had married just 4 days earlier, the man who was supposed to be by her side, celebrating a lifetime together, had vanished without a trace. His wallet, phone, and belongings were found in the room, untouched. However, his passport remained in the hotel safe, undisturbed. If he had fled, he had done so without the most crucial document needed to leave the country legally. On March 8, 2012, police began questioning resort staff and guests, trying to piece together the events that led to Keisha's final moments. That's when an unexpected visitor arrived at the local police station. Jamal Turner, a 26-year-old lifeguard working at the Crystal Cove Resort, walked in with a pale face, trembling hands, and an expression that wavered between guilt and terror. His presence immediately raised suspicion, but what he revealed left investigators speechless. He had been in the room with Keisha that night. He admitted it outright, his voice firm though his entire body seemed to tense under the weight of what he was about to say. Jamal's account painted a complicated and scandalous picture. He had met Keisha the day before, and what started as innocent flirting quickly escalated. By the evening of March 6th, after a heated argument between her and Darius at the resort's bar, Keisha sought him out again, seeking comfort in his company instead of her husband's arms. According to Jamal, they went up to room 407 together, the tension between them charged with impulsive and reckless energy. But what seemed like a secret escape quickly turned into a nightmare. Just minutes after entering the suite, the door burst open. Darius had found them. There was no moment of hesitation. The instant he saw his wife with another man, the room exploded with fury. Jamal described the eruption of violence as immediate and terrifying. Darius lunged at him first, landing a punch so hard he barely stayed on his feet. As he tried to regain his balance, Darius grabbed the first thing he could, a champagne bottle from the minibar, and swung it with brutal force. Overpowered and fearing for his life, Jamal did the only thing he could. He ran. He didn't look back. He didn't know what happened after he fled. He only knew that the sounds he heard as he escaped, shattering glass, screams, the dull thud of repeated impacts, would haunt him forever. With his testimony, the police now had two clear possibilities. Either Jamal was telling the truth and Darius had murdered Keisha in a fit of uncontrollable rage, or Jamal himself was the killer and was shifting the blame onto the missing husband. By March 12, 2012, the search for Darius Washington had intensified. There was no trace of him on flights or ferries, not even at the local docks where he could have hired a private boat. He seemed to have vanished on the island. But then, on March 20th, the breakthrough came. Darius was found in a small beachfront motel on the outskirts of Nassau, far from the luxury resort where he had last been seen. The man who had appeared flawless in his wedding tuxedo days earlier, full of charm and confidence, was now a mere shadow of himself. His hair was disheveled.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
His clothes wrinkled and dirty, and his eyes held a hollow emptiness. His knuckles were bruised, his skin marked by scratches, and his posture was that of a man running from something bigger than the law. When officers took him into custody, he did not resist. There was no struggle, no shouts. They placed the handcuffs on him, and he simply stared ahead, expressionless, emotionless. When asked if he had anything to say, he did not defend himself. He did not ask for a lawyer. He didn't even inquire about how long he would be held. His response was chillingly simple. She deserved it. The case that began as a honeymoon tragedy quickly turned into one of the most shocking murder investigations in recent history. The police wasted no time interrogating Darius, but his chilling response, "She deserved it," set the tone for what was to come. He showed no remorse, no regret, not even a flicker of emotion as detectives questioned him about the brutal murder of his wife. The forensic evidence left little room for doubt. Keisha Washington had suffered multiple blunt force trauma injuries, deep lacerations, and an attempted strangulation. The crime scene told the story of a violent, prolonged attack, one that had escalated over time rather than ending in a single moment of rage. And yet, Darius refused to elaborate on what had happened in room 407 that night. The trial began in April 2012, captivating the world. The press quickly dubbed it the honeymoon murder, splashing Keisha's wedding photos across newspapers and television screens. Her smile, frozen in time, haunted the public. She had looked so happy, so full of life, completely unaware that the man standing beside her in those pictures would soon become her killer. The courtroom was filled to capacity every day. Keisha's family sat in the front row, their grief visible in every strained expression and every exhausted sigh. Her mother, once a warm and vibrant woman, had become a ghost of herself, dressed in mourning black, clutching a tissue she never used. Her father, jaw clenched tight, seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of months. On the opposite side of the courtroom, Darius's parents sat in silent despair. His mother never lifted her gaze, unable to look at the crime scene photos presented as evidence. His father, once proud of his son, avoided the eyes of everyone around him. Darius, however, remained impassive. Dressed in his beige prison uniform, he showed no reaction as the prosecution detailed the horror of Keisha's final moments. The defense attempted to argue that it was a crime of passion, that Darius had suffered a psychotic break upon seeing his wife with another man. They painted him as a humiliated husband, a man shattered by the betrayal of the woman he loved. But the prosecution countered with a much darker narrative. Witnesses from Darius's past testified against him. Ex-girlfriends who recounted chilling stories of his possessive nature, his paranoia, his violent tendencies that had surfaced long before that night in room 407. One woman described a fight in 2007 when Darius had grabbed her wrist so tightly that it left bruises for days. Another spoke of his controlling behavior, how he constantly accused her of cheating, checking her phone for proof that never existed. What ultimately sealed Darius's fate was the hotel's security footage. The jury watched as Keisha and Jamal Turner entered the elevator at 11:45 p.m. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't stumbling. She was smiling, leaning into Jamal, whispering something in his ear. Just 30 minutes later, another camera captured Darius walking toward their suite. He stopped in front of the door. He hesitated, his shoulders tensed, and then he entered. That single moment condemned him. He had time to think, time to calm down, time to walk away. But he didn't. The trial stretched on for months, dividing public opinion. Some saw Darius as a man pushed to the edge, someone who had acted in a blind rage, not knowing what he was doing. Others saw him as a violent man whose true nature had finally surfaced in the worst possible way. When the verdict came in August 2012, the courtroom held its breath. Darius Washington was found guilty of second-degree murder. A murmur swept through the audience as the sentence was read. 25 years in a Bahamian prison. Some thought it was too lenient. Others believed it was a fate worse than death. As Darius was led away in handcuffs, he never looked back. For Jamal Turner, the nightmare didn't end with the trial. Although he was never charged with any crime, his life unraveled in its own way. He lost his job at the resort. The rumors followed him everywhere. People whispered about him, pointed fingers, some even calling him a coward for running away while Keisha was murdered. He left the Bahamas, trying to start over in a different country. But no matter where he went, the past followed him. He took low-paying jobs, changed addresses frequently, avoided making deep connections with anyone. But the weight of that night never left him. It didn't matter if he was a victim too. People would always remember him as the man who was in that room, the man who ran. Even after the trial, Keisha Washington's story never faded. Documentaries, true crime podcasts, and TV specials dissected every detail, turning her murder into a cautionary tale. Photos of her laughing on the beach resurfaced, capturing the tragic irony of a woman who had only hours to live, unaware of the horror awaiting her. Some saw her as a victim of circumstance, trapped in a dangerous marriage. Others debated whether her flirtation with Jamal had played a role in her fate. But regardless of the speculation, one fact remained. Nothing justified the brutality of her death. In Nassau's prison, Darius Washington became a ghost. At first, other inmates observed him with curiosity, some with respect, others with contempt. But he kept to himself, speaking little, existing in silence. He showed no remorse, wrote no letters to Keisha's family, never attempted to explain his actions. He simply endured, allowing the years to strip him of whatever he once was. Journalists tried to secure interviews with him, but he always gave the same response. He had nothing to say. Outside prison walls, Keisha's family struggled to move on. Her mother became an activist against domestic violence, using her daughter's story to raise awareness about the warning signs of toxic relationships. In interviews, she spoke firmly, but her eyes never regained their former light. Her father, on the other hand, withdrew from everything. He refused to participate in public campaigns, avoided the media, and buried himself in his own grief. For him, nothing would bring his daughter back. No justice, no awareness, no amount of talking could change the fact that she was gone. As for Jamal Turner, he did his best to escape the past, but the past refused to let go of him. He moved countries, changed his name, started fresh more times than he could count. But every time someone recognized him, it all unraveled again. Online forums continued to speculate about him, about what really happened that night. To some, he was just another victim. To others, he was the man who had abandoned Keisha when she needed him most. But to Jamal, none of those versions mattered. The only thing that mattered was the guilt he could never shake. Darius served his sentence without incident. The years wore him down, reflecting in his posture, his face, his vacant eyes. Prison stripped him of whatever identity he once had. By the time he was released after serving 25 years, there was no one waiting for him. No family, no friends, no reporters eager for his side of the story. He walked out of the prison gates the same way he had walked in, alone. No one knows for certain what happened to him after that. Some say he stayed in the Bahamas, living a quiet life, trying to disappear. Others believe he left for another country, attempting to escape the name that had become infamous. But there were no records, no trace of him. It was as if he had mastered the art of vanishing, just as he had the night of the murder. Keisha Washington's story lived on, her name forever attached to the crime that took her life. Her murder became a case study, a tragic example of how love can turn into obsession, how passion can morph into possession. But to her family, she was more than just a headline. She was the little girl who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen, the young woman whose laughter could light up a room, the person who had an entire future ahead of her. Time passed, as it always does, but some stories never die. They linger in the air, in the memories of those who lived them, in the whispers of those who retell them. And somewhere in the warm breeze of a distant island, maybe the echo of Keisha Washington's laughter still lingers, carried away by the waves, reminding the world that she was once alive before it all came to an end. The years passed, but the story of Keisha Washington refused to fade. Every anniversary of her death, news outlets revisited the case, analyzing every known detail and speculating on the ones that remained unanswered. Podcasts dissected the crime, some treating it as a tragedy, others sensationalizing it for entertainment. True crime enthusiasts debated the case in online forums, scrutinizing every testimony, every piece of evidence, every possible alternate theory. Some believed Darius Washington had snapped in a moment of uncontrollable rage, while others were convinced he had always been a violent man waiting for the right moment to show his true self. But no matter how much time passed, one fact remained unchanged. Keisha was gone, and nothing could bring her back. For her mother, the grief never lessened, only changed form. She devoted herself to raising awareness about domestic violence, traveling across the country to speak at events, to tell her daughter's story in the hopes of preventing similar tragedies. She became a familiar face in the movement, her voice strong and unwavering even as her hands sometimes trembled when she spoke Keisha's name. But no amount of speeches, no number of awareness campaigns could fill the void left by the daughter she had lost. Her father coped differently. He refused interviews, never spoke about the case publicly, and avoided anything that reminded him of the trial. While his wife fought to make sure Keisha's story wasn't forgotten, he did the opposite, burying himself in silence, in a life stripped of joy. He quit his job, stopped attending family gatherings, and rarely left the house. For him, there was no meaning in turning grief into action. There was only the unbearable fact that his daughter had been taken from him, and nothing, no justice, no prison sentence, no legacy, would ever make up for that.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
Jamal Turner's life never returned to normal. He tried to disappear, changing cities, countries, even names, but the past always found him. Every time he settled somewhere new, someone would eventually recognize him. The whispers would begin, the judgmental stares would follow. He was forever labeled as the man who had been in that hotel room the night Keisha Washington was murdered. Some saw him as a coward, others as a victim, but Jamal himself never stopped wondering if he could have done more. Could he have fought harder? Could he have stayed, done something to stop Darius before it was too late? No matter how many times he told himself he had no chance against the fury that erupted in that room, the guilt ate at him. He never swam again, never returned to the ocean that had once been his life. The water, once his place of peace, now only reminded him of the resort, of the night everything went wrong. Darius Washington served his sentence with the same emotionless detachment he had displayed during his trial. He never caused trouble in prison, never sought attention, never attempted to explain himself. He spoke little, ate his meals, followed the routine, and existed in the gray monotony of his cell. Over the years, the world outside changed, but inside those walls, everything remained the same. His face aged, his body weakened, but the emptiness in his eyes never faded. He received no visitors, answered no letters, refused all interview requests. If he regretted what he had done, he never said so. If he felt remorse, no one ever saw it. He simply waited out the years, a man with nothing left to lose. When his release date finally arrived, there was no one waiting for him outside the prison gates. No reporters, no family, no friends. He stepped into the daylight for the first time in 25 years. A man free to walk away but with nowhere to go. No one knows exactly where he went after that. Some say he stayed in the Bahamas, drifting from one low-paying job to another, living in the shadows, unnoticed and forgotten. Others believe he left the country, managing to slip away into obscurity. There were rumors, occasional sightings, but nothing confirmed. It was as if he had simply vanished, just as he had the night of the murder. Despite the passage of time, Keisha Washington's name continued to echo in the world of true crime. Her story remained a warning, a tale of how love could turn to obsession, how passion could spiral into violence. But for those who had known her, she was more than a case, more than a headline. She was the girl who had once danced barefoot in her parents' kitchen, the woman whose laughter had once been contagious, the person who had dreams and a future that had been stolen in the most brutal way. Time moved forward as it always does, but some stories never truly end. They linger in memories, in whispers, in the spaces between past and present. And somewhere in the warm wind of an island far away, maybe, just maybe, the echo of Keisha Washington's laughter still drifts along the waves, a reminder that she was once here, that she was once alive before it all came to an end. The world moved on, but the shadows of what had happened in room 407 never truly disappeared. Every few years, new documentaries revisited the case, analyzing it from every possible angle. Legal experts debated whether Darius Washington's sentence had been too lenient, whether justice had truly been served. Psychologists dissected his lack of remorse, trying to determine if he had been a man consumed by a moment of madness or if the capacity for such violence had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. Internet forums remained filled with speculation. Some believed Jamal Turner had known more than he had admitted. Others theorized that Keisha had been planning to leave Darius even before their honeymoon, that her marriage had already been unraveling before it had even begun. Theories swirled, fueled by the mystery that Darius himself had refused to clarify. He had been given countless chances to explain himself, to provide his side of the story, but he never had. His only statement remained the same, unchanged from the moment of his arrest. She deserved it. For Keisha's family, the relentless public interest was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept her memory alive. Her mother's activism brought real change, funding shelters for women in abusive relationships, pushing for stronger laws against domestic violence. She traveled the country, standing before crowds, sharing her daughter's story in the hope that it might save someone else. But each interview, Each speech, each documentary forced her to relive the worst moments of her life. She could still picture Keisha as a child, running barefoot through the house, laughing without a care in the world. And then, in the next instant, she would see her daughter's body lying lifeless on the floor of that hotel room, blood soaking into the carpet. The past and present blurred together, and no amount of time could erase the image from her mind. Her father never found the strength to engage with the world in the same way. He withdrew from the public eye entirely, refusing to participate in any discussion of the case. He didn't want to see Keisha's face plastered on television screens, didn't want to hear her name spoken by strangers who had never known her, who had reduced her life to a cautionary tale. He buried himself in work, in routine, in silence. Every night, he sat at the dinner table and stared at the empty chair where his daughter should have been. Some wounds never heal. Some grief cannot be transformed into action. Jamal Turner continued to run from the past, but it clung to him like a shadow. He changed jobs, changed addresses, changed everything he could. But no matter where he went, someone always recognized him. It was never direct. It was in the way people looked at him just a little too long, the way they whispered when he walked by. Some pitied him, others judged him, but no one ever let him forget. He rarely spoke about that night, not because he wanted to protect himself, but because nothing he said would ever make a difference. To the world, he would always be the man who had been there but had done nothing. He had tried to justify it to himself 1,000 times. He had been unarmed, caught off guard, faced with an enraged man who could have easily killed him too. And yet, late at night, when he lay awake staring at the ceiling, the doubts crept in. Could he have stopped it? Could he have saved her? Those questions had no answers, but they haunted him just the same. Darius Washington remained a ghost. His release from prison came and went without much attention. The media had expected a statement, an exclusive interview, a final insight into the mind of a man who had once dominated the headlines. But Darius gave them nothing. He stepped out of the prison gates without looking back, without acknowledging the world that had waited for him to speak. He vanished, slipping away into obscurity. There were occasional sightings, rumors of him working under a false name, living in cheap motels, drifting from place to place. But no one ever confirmed anything. He had disappeared, just as he had always wanted. Keisha's story continued to live on, repeated and retold in countless ways. There were books, documentaries, podcasts, and endless debates. But beneath all the noise, all the analysis and speculation, there was one simple truth. She had been a woman with dreams, with a future, with a life that had been cruelly stolen from her. Long after the headlines faded, after the cameras stopped rolling, after the world had moved on to the next tragedy, the people who had truly known her carried her memory in the quiet moments. In the sound of laughter at family gatherings where her absence was a weight that no one spoke of. In the familiar scent of her perfume, lingering in the back of her mother's closet, untouched since the day she left for her honeymoon. In the way the ocean waves crashed against the shore, just as they had the morning her body was found, indifferent to the horror that had unfolded within the walls of room 407. Time passed as it always does, but some stories never truly end. They become echoes, whispered from one generation to the next, reminders of lives cut short, of love turned to violence, of the fragile line between passion and possession. And somewhere in the warm winds of a distant island, perhaps Keisha Washington's laughter still lingers, carried away by the sea. A ghost of the life she should have had, a voice lost to the waves but never truly forgotten. Did this story teach you about steering clear from infidelity or from murder? Let us know in the comments. Also subscribe to the Daily Family Crimes channel if you haven't and like this video. See you in the next one.